welcome back. This is Sierra. If this is your first time here, hi, I'm Sierra and I am a foreigner living in Japan. Every week I make a new video about the crazy life, lush, or being vegan. So if any of those things are interesting to you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and I will get back with you as soon as the intro is finished. So based on the title, I'm assuming you guys already know what I'm talking about. So today I'm going to be talking about typhoons in Japan. Now before I start, I just want to say, yes, I'm new to living in Japan and I've lived here since May, and so this is my first typhoon season. And so the reason I'm making this video is because a lot of you have been asking me about my experience so far, and a lot of my friends and family back home have been really worried about our family during Typhoon Trami. And so what I'm going to do is first I'm going to talk a little bit about what typhoons are, and then kind of how we prepare for them, and then I'm going to tell you about my experience with the most recent typhoon. And then within my experience, I have some videos and pictures that I took during the typhoon and after. So if you're interested in only my experience with the typhoon, I'm going to put the timestamp when it starts down here, and then that way you can just kind of skip ahead to it and see the part that you really want to see. And one more thing I want to say, obviously, I'm not a meteorologist, I don't know everything about typhoons, and I'm probably going to make some mistakes, so I'm sorry about that in advance, and please, I'm just asking you guys to give me a little bit of grace here because I'm still new at this, and I'm just making this video to throw a little bit of information out there for people who are interested. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Right. So first basic question that everyone keeps asking me is, first of all, oh my gosh, Sierra, what the heck is a typhoon? To put things simply, typhoon is the word that we use in the Asia Pacific just to describe a hurricane. So if that's confusing for you when I'm speaking, just in your head, when you hear the word typhoon, just replace it with hurricane, and it's pretty much the same thing for the purpose of this conversation. So typhoon season in Tokyo, where I live, usually lasts through most of the summer and part of the fall, but it can start earlier in the spring, just kind of depending what the plant decides that it wants to do. Okay, the second question that people keep asking about typhoons is how we prepare for them. So the first thing before I even start with that, I just want to say, most of you guys already know this, but we live on an American military base in Tokyo, and so our buildings are pretty much built like mini bunkers. And I know that sounds really weird, but really, our houses are very square, and then we have houses, and then we have towers. I live in a tower, but the only difference pretty much in the way that the towers are built versus the way that the houses are built is the houses are just shorter and pretty much are big concrete blocks that if when the wind comes, it just kind of goes around them. Tower, which is the kind of building that we live in, a tower is basically an apartment building that just goes up and up and up and up. We have about 9 floors, and they are built the same way. So people who are really worried about us, yes, we are safe here. And when there's a natural disaster, the last time there was a terrible natural disaster, the only thing that happened was the power went out and we had to be evacuated for a couple of days from the towers. I wasn't here, but that's what happened 2 years ago. Alright, so you prepare for a typhoon just like you would any other natural disaster. I kind of think of it sort of like preparing for a really big snowstorm, except we're probably not going to have to worry about heat because it's the middle of the summer and it's a typhoon. When the first typhoon happened, the housing office told us to make sure that we had extra water, non-perishables, and that we had all of our family's documents in one place. In the event that we had to evacuate, we could just kind of grab and go. As soon as we got moved into our housing, what I did is I just put everything that we needed. I made sure that I knew where all of our legal documents were so we could grab and go if we needed to. I also bought some extra water that we have sitting in our pantry just in case we need it. And then I made a bunch of hardtack and then non-perishable granola bars that we could just kind of save in case we need them for an emergency. And then as soon as I got our first storm warning and every time since, and it's been recommended that we bring in patio furniture, anything that could blow around. Now, I can't really speak to exactly how neighborhoods handle it off base, but on base, depending on how the severity of the storm is, they usually shut down the base shuttle, and sometimes they shut down the gates and they tell us that we need to be home at a certain time and to avoid going outside pretty much. And then once the storm starts, you just kind of hang out in your house and you wait for it to pass. And that's what we've done for the past 4 times. Okay, so Typhoon Trami, as I said before, is our 4th typhoon that we've had here, and Trami has been one of the worst typhoons that Tokyo has had in quite a while. I don't know if it's accurate, but I read somewhere that it was one of the most violent typhoons that has hit Tokyo in the past 20 years. As soon as we have a 24-hour warning, I watered the plants and then brought them all in and then made sure again that we had enough water, and I actually ate most of the granola that I had made before, and so I made some new granola, and then pretty much once it was time for the storm to start, I just kind of hung out in my living room and we waited. So Trami didn't hit my area of Tokyo until about 10 p.m. that night, and at first it pretty much just sounded like a thunderstorm because the rain just started coming in really heavily. And then after about, I would say half an hour, I could hear the wind blowing, and again, it just kind of sounded like a regular storm. The typhoon that we had before, we were supposed to have a really crazy storm, but then ended up missing us, and so I was hoping, okay, well, maybe it just missed us. So anyway, sat in my living room for a little bit longer, and then, I noticed that the wind and rain are getting a lot stronger. Maybe an hour or so into the storm, I heard this big kerplunk sound, and I didn't know what it was, but it made me a little bit worried. So I got off the couch, and I ran to the patio, and I saw this. As you can see in the picture, pretty much what happened is one of the trees outside fell out and smashed a car. Well, this particular car, I think the owner just kind of pulled it out, but it was just still really, really scary. So pretty much from 10 p.m. to about, I would say 2 or 3 p.m., the storm was just like going crazy. After a little while, I was getting kind of bored and I didn't know what to do with myself, but the storm was really, really loud with all the whistling, and honestly, the whole time my dog kept making all these loud, annoying noises, barking, whining. It's like he knew, it was almost like, he was trying to tell me that there was a storm going on, even though I was aware that there was a storm going on, but I couldn't do anything about it, and so even if I wanted to sleep during the storm, I couldn't. Anyway, and so the storm keeps going on, and then all of a sudden I hear this big sound. Before, when the tree fell, I just heard, like a smacking type sound. The second time I heard this big gust of wind, all of a sudden I heard this really, really loud plunking sound. And honestly, it was so loud and it happened so quickly, I honestly thought that the building that I was living in somehow had cracked. I know that's crazy, but guys, remember, this is my first big typhoon, and so my brain's going crazy, and I'm assuming, like half of the building is gone. That's not actually what happened. This is what happened. This picture is really deceiving, but as you can tell, that tree was probably at least 3 feet in diameter. And when it fell over, it hit a concrete wall, and so it honestly did kind of sound like the building was cracking. Yeah, I couldn't actually see it because the windows towards my house face that direction, but still, it was absolutely terrifying. And then at that point where I realized, this stuff is really, really starting to get real. And so again, I'm up until like 2:30, 3 in the morning, kind of freaking out and worrying about this. And then all of a sudden, almost seeming out of nowhere, the storm just kind of calmed. And then it was over, and then we could fall asleep. Concludes my official experience of the storm. So now I'm just going to kind of share what I saw the next morning. So the next morning I got up, and of course, Doug wanted to go out, and so I took him for his morning walk. And as I walked down the neighborhood, I actually started to realize how bad the storm actually had been. But as I continued to walk through the neighborhood, I noticed it wasn't just trees. Like, a lot of people's patio furniture was no longer stuck to their patio, and I noticed a lot of people's sheds had been blown over, and then there were just random toys and random stuff pretty much everywhere in my neighborhood. And then I realized, oh wow, I knew that the towers and the buildings were built really well, but for the storm to be this strong and to be this bad, our buildings had to be really, really, really well built, because of the fact that I honestly didn't feel any swaying, which I don't know if it was really strong enough to move the swaying back and forth, but that's when I realized really how strong the storm was, which is wow. So yeah. And the other thing I noticed when I was on our walk is that, because this is a military base, so the storm happened, and then immediately they started cleaning it up, because not only was the big tree by my house pretty much sitting on the school's fence, but it earlier that morning it had been blocking the road, and a bunch of the other trees were blocking the road, and so obviously we couldn't run the base until things were cleaned up. And so that's pretty much what I've been hearing for the past 48 hours at my house. I've heard, during working hours, so that's like 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., I've heard pretty much nothing but chainsaws because they have to take the trees apart in order to move them. Okay, so that concludes my experience with Typhoon Trami. If you guys have any questions about it, or if you guys have any questions about typhoons in general, I've said I am not an expert. Go ahead and let me know in the comments, and if it's about my experience, I will let you know what I think, and if it's about typhoons in general, I will try to find someone who can answer that question, or I will research it, and I will also let you know. Also, if you like this video, you can help me out by hitting that like and subscribe button. That way you'll get a notification every single time I post something new and exciting. So, as I said before, that's all I have for you guys today. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye!